So I just got done rearranging a bunch of furniture, and this is the best angle I can get right now. There's a tripod in the mail that will hopefully help me have a significantly better angle for shooting, but for now we're going to be doing me sitting, talking into the microphone at the desk again, like it's 2016. This will be a controversial versus match. I'm well aware of that. These are two highly beloved characters from the Cosmere. Vin from Mistborn and Kaladin from Stormlight Archive. You guys know the categories before I even jump into them, but let's go ahead and go on over them. We have origin, development, role, interest for the reader, relationships, personality, and the tiebreaker, who would win in a fight. We have an odd number, and the tiebreaker only being worth half a point to prevent any ties from happening. I don't like ties. Jumping into the first category, we have origin. Two characters whose origins are crucial to who they develop into as characters. Vin coming from the bottom of the streets and an abusive background. This lends to her having this darker side to her, this meek, pushed down, repressed energy, anger in her that's just ready to come and lash out. And we see that start bubbling up in later books and be used in very productive ways. It's one of the most interesting parts of her whole character to me, is how she's one of these people who directs and channels this horrid past she went through into heroic good things. Turn around and we have Kaladin. If Vin's origin is nearly flawless, I would go as far as to say that Kaladin's is flawless. He has the strongest origin, arguably, of any modern fantasy character in terms of how it lends to his growth and who he is, and gets you on the side of Kaladin incredibly quickly. Kaladin is just someone everyone gets behind. If you have read Stormlight, you're on Kaladin's side. He's not perfect. He's no Mary Sue by any means. Brandon Sanderson, as an author, does not have a Mary Sue problem with his writings. Kaladin has flaws. As a person, he can be wrong, and he can make very flawed decisions, but you know he's a good person. You know he's been through the ringer, and his origin of us getting to know him at his bottom and exploring his past was incredibly well done. And I have to give the first point here to Kaladin. It's not really even much of a competition. Vin can blow most people totally out of the water for origin, but Kaladin's one of the few that stands as a monolith when it comes to this point. Next we have development, and here it's incredibly one-sided again, but for the other direction. Kaladin's development's good, although at times it can feel a bit meandering. He spent most of the last two Stormlight books, 2 and 3, because I don't know when you're watching this, kind of meandering his own morals and just questioning himself. He's become a bit of a lazy protagonist, and yes, he's still out there fighting and making decisions, but a whole lot of his time is just considered thinking. And that's very good in some aspects of getting to know a character and understanding the conflict they're going through, but it felt drawn out, and at times it felt kind of almost manufactured conflict, and I didn't love every page of it. Especially with the conflict over the king in the second book, I just wasn't a huge fan of that, and in book 3 he's come to just kind of exploring investigative work, which really goes against of what he's established as from the first book. So I'm confused by his development, but I'll give an asterisk to this point that certainly, as Stormlight continues on, Kaladin can come back around and earn this point without a doubt. But as it stands right now, his arc is not complete, and it seems like there's been a few missteps already early on, at least in my opinion. So for that reason, Vin will get this point, but let's explore why. Vin's development is incredible. She starts at the bottom, and slowly works her way up to being a crucial part of a gang resistance against an empire, and then moving up further to then head that resistance and have a final showdown with evils throughout the remaining Mistborn books that are perfect foils for her development. Every one she goes against represents an internal struggle Vin has to deal with, which is a smart decision by Brandon. Having that villain be a good reflection of your hero is a typical literary technique that usually can only enhance a story if it's executed well, and with Vin, it's done incredibly well throughout the first Mistborn era. By the end of one book, she's gone from the bottom to an Emperor Slayer. You as the reader, because Brandon did it so well, can only really get behind it. This was done through clever plot choices like killing off Kelsier and giving her some solid motivation, not making her into a Mary Sue, but also embracing the fact that she is a total badass who is meant for this job. It was a very good balance struck, and if there was only a few missteps, this development of character could have been extremely off-putting, but it just worked. So Vin will take the development point. Now we have role they play in the world they are in, and once again, it's gonna have to lean Vin here. But there's gonna be an asterisk on this point as well. Kaladin's stumbled development has hurt how I view his role overall. If we were purely going off first books for the series they are in, I might toss it to Kaladin here. But the stumbled development has hurt the overall role Kaladin's playing and confused it a little. And once Stormlight is complete, once again I might have to come back and redo this matchup. I'm very happy to do that. But as they currently sit, Vin's role is cleaner, it's a little better overall written, and I feel like the concept was more fully fleshed out before pen was put to paper. For that reason, Vin will take the role point. Next up, we have interest for the reader, and I'm going to go ahead and call this one a wash. It's the same author at the same technical level creating two of his absolute best. It's entirely down to personal preference who of these two you find more interesting, and picking one over the other would just be ridiculous. There's no writing style differences or real plot involvement or role differences that you could say this one is more interesting than that. I have my own personal leanings, but again, not going to go ahead and throw that in here. This point is a wash. Now we have relationships. Vin has a couple of great relationships. Kaladin has a couple great relationships, and they're on the same level. Brandon likes to take his main protagonist of his story and have a few solid bonds he can really focus on with them and fully flesh out. That's one of the few big differences between Robert Jordan's writing style and Brandon Sanderson. Robert Jordan's not afraid to introduce his character to a lot of different people and spend a ton of time fleshing out those relationships. Brandon likes focusing a bit more on plot development and continuing the story, and it's why his books feel a bit more action-packed. He'll have his protagonists have a few really good relationships to help explore them as characters and the other people they're talking with, but he's not going to spend the time to introduce Vin or Kaladin and have a fully fleshed relationship with 30 people apiece. Vin's strongest relationships are with Elend and Kelsier, without a doubt, and Kaladin's strongest are with Vin, Shallan, and probably Dalinar, and a few of Bridge 4. Although his relationship is kind of with Bridge 4 as a whole, it's rarely about the one-on-one dialogue he has, unless there is a specific plot happening. But it's because of that last one I'm giving this point to Kaladin. Bridge 4's relationship with not only Kaladin as a character, but his development as a character has been crucial. And this also results in one of the best storyline plot lines, brotherhoods, that there's been in recent fantasy. For that reason, I'm tossing this to Kaladin quite handily. It doesn't need to go much more beyond that, because the actual relationships they're in are on similar levels. It's just that Kaladin has this one, which just really is special to so many readers. Bridge 4 has kind of become a fantasy mantra, and it's on the same level as the Blackguard or even the Black Company. Now we have personality, and this category is really going to demonstrate Brandon's ability as an author to have two entirely different approaches to developing someone's personality. Kaladin has a strong external personality. He's a warrior, but not the typical one. There's depth to that warrior.
Well, duh.
And he's very expressive to those he trusts about what his goals are and objectives. You know who Kaladin is upon meeting him. He'll give off that vibe. Vin, on the other hand, is almost entirely an internal character. She gives off very little to those around her, and you need to spend a lot of time sitting in her head to fully understand who she is. This is really one of the most impressive demonstrations you can do to prove Brandon's ability as an author. The fact that he can have two almost entirely different presented characters that are almost equal in every aspect of who they are
is remarkable.
If I'd only read each books these characters are involved in so far once, I would go ahead and toss this to Kaladin. But upon rereading Mistborn Era 1, and I've also reread what's available in Stormlight so far, I'm going to go ahead and lean Vin for personality here. That internal development, it establishes almost a relationship between her and the reader that exists somewhat with Kaladin, but with Vin, this wall of separation that exists between almost any fictional character and the reader begins to absolutely evaporate. You don't feel like you're reading some character who just exists in this world. Brandon really puts you in her head. And I feel like we all understand Vin on a really deep level. In fact, her personality comes across so well, and her thoughts that kind of rage around in her head while trying to hold back all these emotions she feels gives you a really great insight into anxiety. She is a warrior just like Kaladin. The only difference is she's fighting an internal battle as well as external ones. And I'm aware Kaladin also deals with depression, and that is handled almost as well as Vin's anxiety. But Kaladin's is kind of handled and dealt with within the first book, and occasionally pops up in the second, and has almost entirely been forgotten in the third. Vin's internal struggles really come through on a much deeper level consistently all the way till the end, and it lets you as the reader truly understand who she is, her personality, and the motives behind her personality come extremely clear. As her confidence builds and the actual Vin, the real personality, emerges more and more as Mistborn Era 1 continues, it becomes an even more gratifying part of the story, something that Kaladin just doesn't quite have after book 1. And yeah, book 2 and 3 don't entirely focus on Kaladin, which could be a part of why this problem exists, but he's still there, and I feel like those moments could have still existed. Brandon was just more focused on other characters, which is fine, and I'm not hating on Stormlight at all. It's one of my favorite fantasy series so far. I hope it stays at the quality it's currently being presented at. And so at this point, we'll handily go to Vin. And now we have the final category. The one many of you are just waiting for, frothing at the mouth, who would win in a fight. I've gone through and pulled a lot of feats for both of these two. If we stripped all powers and these two are fighting just fist to fist or knife to knife with no supernatural abilities, Kaladin would take it quite handily. But we have to look at what they standardly bring into combat. Kaladin sits with Stormlight, and unless a storm is happening, it'll go away. Vin brings in some metals, and unless she has a huge supply, it will run out. Kaladin doesn't need to take the time to swallow more metals to keep going, but Vin is exceptionally good at hit and run, and when she runs, she can refuel almost instantaneously. Kaladin's Stormlight on a typical day seems to last him about a good 15 minutes in combat at best, and that might be giving him a bit too much. Vin's metals, it's around the same time frame, but I might push it to 15 to 20 to maybe even 25. It's inconsistent exactly what she has on her depending on what's going on in the series, but taking her on a typical day, the surprise fights, again, there's some inconsistency, but she almost never runs out because she's so good at ending a fight before it'll get there. She doesn't always carry the metal on her that allows her to predict the future. Both of these two have healing factors. They both hit incredibly hard, enhance strength and speed, but I have to at the end toss it to Vin here because her enhanced strength and speed, just reading off the pages, seems to be on another level to Kaladin. Also, the manipulation of metal and the environment around her would be a huge tool to taking down Kaladin. Yes, Kaladin's weapon is not metal. He has a spear, which is sil, and it's great. Vin could not mess with that. But assuming they're in any kind of reasonable urban environment, any city at all, there'll be nails, coins, and all kinds of things Vin can utilize in combat, which gives her a whole other area of attack Kaladin does not have, and no way he could really predict it or get used to it. It's hard to deal with nails shooting at you at the speeds Vin can push them with. And on top of that, Kaladin's never really been a dirty fighter. Upon rereading Mistborn, Vin will fight dirty. She'll do anything needed to come out on top. She is absolutely a cornered animal if she feels like she's losing, and she can lash out in incredibly harsh ways. And for those reasons, in a realistic fight, Vin takes it. But again, I have to throw the asterisk on this point. Kaladin, throughout Stormlight, could upgrade in power significantly, and I'll have to re-examine this fight. This video is supposed to just be these two characters as they sit after 3 books. I felt like that was a fair way to assess them, because once Kaladin has 5, 10 maybe under his belt involved in this universe, he'll probably sweep a lot more, and I just thought it'd be interesting to look at them after both at 3. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here, and have a good one, y'all. Peace.